Back up in the basement. We just went over option contracts and unilateral contract mitigation of harshness, so to speak. And now we're going to cruise through the next parts, which are going to be negotiations, how to complete terms, gap fillers, and promissory estoppel. I think that's going to be a separate video, not going to lie. But negotiations starting here, section 26. And so, I was like thinking about like what a negotiation is. Intuitively, I think we kind of just understand that it's working out a deal. One person, one party, and another party are can't meet where like a settled exchange of what is they consider fair. And so, um, right, that's the part of negotiations. And so the language of 26, preliminary negotiations, a manifestation of willingness to enter into a bargain is not an offer. And Like if the person to whom it is addressed knows or has reason to know that the person making it does not intend to conclude a bargain until he has made further manifestation of assent. And my note, manifestation of assent to enter in a bargain is not an offer if reasonable to know that they did not intend to conclude it. And so, like, the offer portion, right, in its like basic form, I offer to sell you this car for 20,000. Understanding that if I say yes, we'll sell it, right? A manifestation of willingness to enter is kind of the idea of negotiation because you don't negotiate unless you kind of want to figure out a determined like mutual ground and understanding that like some negotiations may feel like offers, right? And so, for instance, maybe I send a quote of what my busing service is to you. And, I don't put anywhere down there that it's not an offer, but a quote by itself, right? That's not necessarily an offer. Depending on the quote. But if I simply just said it's gonna hover around $5,000 to do this, that may or may not actually be an offer or just negotiations, just a willingness to work out a price. And so that's kind of an example of where that might draw some funny lines. Section 27 is manifestation of assent. Written memorial is contemplated. The language of this section is manifestations of assent that are in themselves sufficient to conclude a contract will not be prevented from so operating by the fact that the parties also manifest an intention to prepare and adopt a written memorial thereof. But the circumstances may show that the agreements are preliminary negotiations. And so let's say, so in my language, manifestations of assent are sufficient. Just because y'all want to put in writing later does not mean that the prior assent did not happen. Sometimes it just is preliminary negotiations. So a little note, leeway to distinguish preliminary negotiations. And so this is, for instance, at the table of where a deal is going to happen. And so maybe me and Dirty Dan over here are trying to figure out a deal of how to commission his services for the building of my golf course. And I need his services. And, we work it out for like an hour or so. And, we both know because we both said like it's going to be 2,000, and it's like, okay, we got ourselves a deal. And so orally, we have concluded in a contract. And afterwards, I say, I'm going to put it in writing later. Um, just because there's no writing right there, 27 says that just because I intend to do the writing later does not negate that we have assented to this deal. Um, that is kind of the picture that I'm drawing here. Next topic, how to complete terms need to be reasonably So this is in regards to terms. When we talked about section 21, that was like reasonableness of kind of assent and offer and um, but this one is specifically the terms. And so section 33, certainty, subsection 1 reads, even though a manifestation of intention is intended to be understood as an offer, it cannot be accepted so as to form a contract unless the terms of the contract are reasonably certain. So, in other words, if like there are terms to this contract, right? It's like X amount of dollars for this amount of time, yada yada yada. Um, and then you assent, you agree to it, then it becomes like a deal. But if say like, yeah, I want you to work for me, and I said yes, and then there wasn't like I didn't know the pay, I didn't know the hours, like those terms were just unclear, um, then it may actually not uh it would not work as an acceptance under section 33. Subsection 2, the terms of a contract are reasonably certain if they provide a basis for determining the existence of a breach and for giving an appropriate remedy. So like how certain is reasonably certain, right? And so subsection 2 defines it as, well, if you know that it's breachable and that, you know, that is there a possible remedy if there a breach were to occur, then we can know like generally that the terms are there. But yeah, so like in the example of if I give you a job but you don't list the terms, um there's nothing to violate, you know what I mean? And so it would not be reasonably certain. 3, open terms. Oh, sorry. The fact that one or more terms of a proposed bargain are left open or uncertain may show that a manifestation of intention is not intended to be understood as an offer or as an acceptance. So just because a contract does not have one or two terms does not mean it's not certain. And so kind of giving leeway to inject some reasonableness. Gap fillers are terms. We're jumping to the UCC a little bit early, but this was kind of like in regard to terms. It has to be goods, and we'll talk about that later. But if there's not clear terms, um, then unless otherwise agreed, right? Like there are certain like the place for delivery of goods, then if you don't put the terms, you're gonna assume place of business, or if they don't have a place of business, then their residence. Like those are your default places for delivery. And B, in a contract for the sale of identified goods, which to the knowledge of the parties at the time of contract or in some other place, the place is the place for their delivery. Um, if you know that like when you made the deal that they were supposed to be at that location, they're actually not, you just assume that it's still that location. Um, and now we're gonna go into promissory estoppel. This one's gonna be a separate video because it is kind of like a bigger topic. And so BRB